Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey all, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today I have a wonderful interview with Dr. Tamar Chansky. She is going to be talking to us about how to free our child from negative thinking. That's actually title of one of her books. And this is such an important topic and something that comes up all the time in our community. And when we are coaching parents, we hear parents who just don't know what to do when their child is like, I'm the worst, or even you're the worst, right? That black and white thinking. And they just seem so unhappy and they seem to be just so negative. We're also going to talk about big feelings and the place they have in terms of negative thinking and how we can help our child with big feelings that they have. Before we meet Dr. Chansky, I would love it if you could share this episode with a friend, if you know someone that you know that it would help, and if you would make sure that you're following the podcast, is hitting the follow button so you never miss an episode, and that also helps us to be found by other parents so that we can help spread the word about peaceful parenting and support more families out in the world. While you're there, we'd love a 5-star rating on Apple and Spotify and a 5-star review on Apple letting us know what the podcast means to you. Would be fantastic if you could do those things while you're there. Helps us and helps the show. All right, let's meet Dr. Chansky. Hello, Dr. Chansky. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you today about negative thinking. And that's something that just comes up so much when I work with parents and in my community. And it's so hard because parents just want to say like, oh no, honey, that's not true. And that never works.
That in a nutshell, that's the project. Yes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Let's see. I'm a clinical psychologist and I work with anxious and kind of negative thinking kids, teens, and adults. So my practice is really all ages, which I really enjoy because I learn the clarity from the little, the younger kids helps me with the adults, the wisdom from the adults helps me with the little kids. So yeah, it's been really wonderful to be able to work with all ages. And yeah, that's been that's been my story for many decades now. Kind of hard to believe.
Well, I just read your book, Free Your Child from Negative Thinking. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. And I also know you have a book. I haven't read it yet, but it's well recommended, Free Your Child from Anxiety. So it seems like you've had a lot of experience in those areas. And we'll talk about this more, but it struck me that the approaches for both are very similar for negative thinking and anxiety.
Yes. And I also wrote a book for adults eventually so that they could have their own book, Freeing Yourself from Anxiety, which also has negative thinking strategies in there as well. This is just, it's sort of like, is this a special population? No, this is everybody. We all, we're wired to have these quick interpretations that are, often negative or catastrophic. And so what do we need to do is just to be able to recognize that that is going to be the first reaction, but not to kind of stay there and really listen to the meaning of it and look at what's going on and be able to have kind of other ways of interpreting and navigating through life.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that the wonderful thing too, which is so clear from your book, is that it can be changed.
Yes.
That it's not like a, static, I'm just anxious or I'm just a negative thinker or my kid is just negative. It's something that we can change. And so let's talk about that. So just to kind of ground us in the conversation, can you give us some examples of negative thinking? Like how does that show up in children? And parents might be thinking, well, duh, but maybe let's like just have a few examples.
Sure. I mean, if you think about even, a really young child who's trying to build a tower or something like that, and the blocks fall down as they inevitably do. And the child might say, "That's so stupid," or "I'm so stupid," or "I can't do anything." It's sort of when, you know, negative thinking is when the script goes beyond the situation. So it's really those global assessments of ourselves or situations that affect how we feel. They're not true, but they're very powerful when we listen to them. So that child who's thinking, I can't do anything, or I'm never, I'm done with the blocks. I'm not going to do that again. If we don't kind of intervene and help them interpret that more accurately, they're going to have a sense of themselves as not being capable, a sense of the world that it should be instantly easy, and if it's not, stay away from it. So, yeah, it's these little moments like that. It could be a middle school student, comes home and says, "Everybody hates me. Like, I can't believe I said that in class, and now everybody," the absolutes. You kind of have your ears tuned to those everybody, always, nobody, never kind of words that again make that really, I'm sure, difficult experience that that child had that day into something that's more set in stone. You know, Teenagers likewise, feeling if they didn't do well on a test or something like that, I'm never getting into college, there goes my future, that kind of thing.
Why doesn't it work when parents say, "Oh, honey, that's not true. You have lots of friends."
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's talk about the body. So, negative thinking is about thoughts, but how those thoughts affect our nervous system is that we get very dysregulated and we're, kind of not available for information. We're thrown into a kind of fight or flight response. Parents will say, that it's sometimes negative kids with negative thinking, they're harder to approach because 'cause they're angry a lot. An anxious child might not be, sometimes they can be obviously angry too, but with negative thinking, there is that you get that irritability a lot of the time and anger because those thoughts are making them feel trapped, hopeless, that kind of thing. And so parents have to intervene more with where their child is rather than try to get them somewhere else, either by dismissing, reassuring, something like that. So empathy is the big, first strategy. And sometimes that's all kids need. You're really upset. That today was really hard. I see you're really upset. A lot of times with middle school students, teenagers, they really don't want parents to problem solve for them. They want to be seen and heard. And so that empathy piece is not just like, you know, a throwaway. It's a very powerful response that a lot of times parents will say, "How can I empathize if my child is saying their life's over?" or something like that.
Right. Right.
You're not agreeing that that's true. You're believing that that's how your child is feeling and you're meeting them there.
When my dad's a psychologist also, and when I was growing up, I use this line all the time with my own kids and with clients to tell them to say to their kids, he would say, "You can empathize by saying it must be really, really hard to feel that way." If someone say, "Everyone hates me," you can empathize by saying it must be really hard to feel that way. And then my dad would add, "But that's not how I see it." And I thought that was just such a lovely way to empathize without agreeing.
That's beautiful. And I love the order of that. Sometimes I'll, say to parents as a response, but I'm now going to incorporate what your dad says or said.
Isn't that
Yeah,
lovely?
that's lovely.
Yeah.
Just like, I don't see it that way, but I can see how upsetting this is for you. But I love just
Mhm.
kind of putting that, that empathy
Mhm.
first. And,
Yeah.
and
Well, another thing that struck me that you were when you were just talking, is that you're saying negative thinking is the fight or flight response, like the nervous system response to difficult feelings. Someone said something mean to you and like everybody hates me, right? And it's that the difficult feeling of having hurt feelings, which activates the body's nervous system of the fight or flight. And anxiety, when you were just talking about the similarities to anxiety, is that also a hijacked nervous system and amygdala taking over. But it's like the negative thinking is the fight and the anxiety is the flight or freeze, right? But it's like the same nervous system response, but just a different expression of it.
Exactly, and the common denominator is something's wrong
Mhm.
or I'm not safe, but let's just say something's wrong, that's where you wanna meet your child there, that's how they're feeling, and then, as we go through other steps and other responses, that it's really about letting those thoughts just be thoughts and it's generating other ideas or other interpretations of that situation so that eventually, that a child can kind of hear that thought, maybe label it. It's that everything is wrong thought rather than everything's wrong, just to
Mhm.
have that
Mhm.
separation to be able to decide which interpretation, feels better to you, feels truer to you, which is the one you're going to kind of move forward with.
That makes so much sense, and I wanna ask you more about that in a minute, but before we go to the tools, what causes some kids to be negative, I'll just say, quote, "negative thinkers," and other kids to be a little bit more optimistic or resilient?
Well, that's a great question, and I will answer it. But before I do, I just want to say that resilience is teachable. You said this at the opening, Sarah, that, we can change these patterns. Sometimes, it's wonderful to have a child who has an easier temperament. Let's just admit it. You're right. But even kids who aren't, sort of tend to head that way first on their own can learn how to get there. And, what's the answer of why some kids are more born more with a, what's wrong or absolutes temperament. It's so, many different factors. We really, it's a cognitive style. Maybe that's something that they have, they were born with. Sometimes it can be observed and learned, but if you have more than one child in, that it's not like it's your fault. If
Mhm.
you're doing so, I mean, we can all work on how we interpret things, but you could have one child who, you know, is looking at a situation saying, "This is a disaster. What are we gonna do?" And the other one's getting the mop and cleaning up, the whatever, the milk that's spilled or something like that. It just, it's not like nurture is that's the cause that, I'm sorry.
No, no, I got what you're saying, and I
Yeah,
was just thinking about,
you know
so my sons are old, they're grown up now, but when they were little, I have this the perfect example of what you're saying is when they were little, 6 and 3, I think, we were visiting my dad, and they were being sort of like normal, noisy 6 and 3-year-olds,
Yeah,
and my dad's husband got super annoyed with them and yelled at them, and my 6-year-old, who's my more sensitive guy, burst into tears,
right.
and my 3-year-old scowled at him and said, "Poppy is a mean man." Which is like it really, they were raised pretty much as the same as 2 siblings can be raised,
Yes.
but it really was that my younger son externalized that
Yeah,
experience and my older son internalized
yes.
it, right?
That's such a clear example, of just what yeah, temperament or your younger child having already that distance that
Mhm.
your older child, can cultivate.
Yeah.
That's the thing is just, and that's why when we just try to, move our kids out of this mode, we're not really teaching them that skill to do that themselves another time, you know? It's like, what does that sound like to you? That's gonna be more
Mhm.
helpful than kind of solving it for them. So we're really
Mhm.
looking at skills that kids can learn and take with them throughout their lives.
It seems like the big idea that you teach is what you were just kind of alluding to. And in your book, you call it relabeling the problem or the thinking. And you talk about talking to kids about if the thoughts are coming from their negative brain or their meanie brain, which
Yes.
I love that, their meanie brain, or from their smart brain. And you talk about that neutral thinking. Can you just expand on that a little bit and maybe give some tips of how parents can do that when their kids are, say, okay, I'll give you an example to work with. Your kid comes home, your 8-year-old comes home from a soccer game and has, was playing goalie and they missed a goal and the team lost because they missed this goal or they, whatever you call it in soccer. I don't play soccer. But and they're like, I'm the worst soccer player. Everyone hates me. I'm quitting the team. Like, how would you help a child who's stuck in that negative thinking?
Yeah. I think the first thing, just kind of another headline for parents is that, I always say that the opposite of negative thinking isn't positive thinking, it's possible thinking, just looking at other possibilities. So we might, approach a child like that and think we have to make them feel good about that situation, whereas really we just need what's going to help them to feel good is looking at that experience more in perspective. So, starting with empathy to say, I can see this really is hitting you hard. You care so much about this sport or about your team, and this will really hit you hard. Just doing that and not sort of disagreeing with your positive take on it, like, "It's not so bad, it happens all the time," which are, okay ideas for later perhaps, if you're saying to your child, think of who's your favorite soccer player and how do you think they handle days that go like that, but that's
Mhm.
not in that moment. You want to bring your calm and your belief to your child that that's how they're feeling. And then, you might even, so a big part of the kind of antidote to the global, I'm never going to play again, I am the worst player, I'm not good at anything, is to get more specific. And, you know, you might say, in that case, what's the hardest part about this for you? I let the team down. And you say, you are so devoted. I can really feel that. You care so much. What do people do when they miss a goal? Like that happens in every game. So you kind of you're accepting that that is what your child is feeling. And then you're saying, this is something that we can navigate, to a different understanding of that situation. Saying what's the hardest part or what's the part that upsets you the most about it starts to get it more granular. And then we have more of a problem that we can solve or just connect with. I get why, you do feel so much responsibility for, for this team. And I bet your teammates really appreciate that. What do they do when they miss? I mean, this is sort of like that's the hard thing about sports. You're sort of taking it out of this personal failing and explaining the world how it works without, being whatever pedantic about it or insensitive or something like that. You're really seeing them in the context of what's going on for them.
So you're I mean, it seems like that's still part of the acknowledging and empathizing and also giving perspective. But would you talk about I mean, I just love what you were talking about, helping them see that the thinking is coming from their fight or flight or from their
Sure.
amygdala, that meanie brain thing. Is that would that be would you use that in a different situation or could you use that in this sort of situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times I will use, though I don't play sports at all.
Mhm.
Sports is just a great realm to look at these issues because people lose every time. People, and how do those incredibly skilled athletes, if you look at professional athletes, how do they continue even though every game somebody loses, somebody wins, or every competition somebody loses, somebody wins? So that's where kind of borrowing the either asking the child how do you think that person should think? What do you think their kind of negative talk or their mini brain is saying to them? And do you think that that makes sense for them? Or do you think that there's another, what would you tell them essentially? So you're just getting out of the corner of I'm horrible and the only solution is, that to make them feel like they're amazing and to just get into this space of looking at different possibilities of what would that person think or what would you want to tell them, what did your coach say? It's really more, but again, you don't go to that getting perspective until you see, I mean, you can almost see your child's body. You see them kind of exhale a little bit and settle from your empathy, from you bringing your calm, from you, even though you're upset because your child is upset, you're not kind of seeing this as an emergency that you have to get off your child
Right.
and just so and it when I talk about these things, it seems like, "Oh, well, I don't have time for a half an hour conversation," or something like that. But it really could be the better use of your 5 minutes than trying to convince them that everything's fine, which could take a lot longer and not yield good results. So, in a way, the more that parents reframe what their job is supporting their child and helping them to kind of sort through what happened and give them the opportunity to draw different conclusions. Go back to the kid who, the block tower falls. It's like things are hard at first, aren't they? Or sometimes blocks fall. You're teaching them about the world. The soccer player, yeah, it's this is what sports are like. You can think about, is there something you would do differently there? Or sometimes that's just how it works out. You're kind of getting into that space of how things work.
So I'm thinking, so as you're talking, I'm thinking that that what I wanted you to talk about was more the externalizing the problem, but I think I gave you an example where that wouldn't be appropriate, because something bad really did happen. And so you're focusing, like what you're advising is to focus more on perspective, and that this, I'll admit, I was asking you a leading question, and then I gave a bad example because I think that when in your book you talk about not engaging with the content, but that would be in a different sort of scenario, it sounds like, to not engage with the content. And here, with the example with something bad actually did happen, that the kid, missed the goal or whatever. That's not a time where you would say, like, we're not going to engage with the content of negative thinking. This is the time where we want to give perspective and actually, yes, engage with the content, but give perspective and help them see a bigger picture than this one missed goal.
Yeah.
Does that make sense what I'm
Yeah. And I
saying?
think just to clarify, not engaging with the content, what does that mean? If a child's
Yes,
saying,
please.
I hate myself, I'm a terrible person, you might, you know, go be drawn into like, why do you hate yourself? Why,
Right,
why would you ever hate yourself? You're so wonderful. That's engaging with what, sort of what's on the surface of what your child is saying. But instead, with your empathy, you're looking at your child struggling and you say, you're so upset right now. Let's figure this out together. I want to understand this. That's that's different and you're going to do that co-regulation. You're not arguing with where, I mean, it might sound silly to say, that if you tell your child they're wonderful, that you're arguing with them. It's not exactly that, but they're in distress and believing one thing, and you're telling them something else at a time when they are least receptive to that
right.
information. So just, coming in and sort of joining them where they are, then yeah, you don't the kind of hating themselves is more the smoke than the fire of what, you might say, like, what when it's not like something obvious that about, like the soccer game, you might say, like, what happened? When did you start feeling that way? Or like what was going on? Something must have started that for you. What was going on for you? I forgot my lunch, or you just start to hear like, oh, okay, yeah, I
Mhm.
get that. Let's tell me what happened. So if you're willing to go in to kind of, the story that's underneath that smoke of, I hate everything, or I'm terrible, or, you don't love me. That's a
Mhm.
big one, just you see kids just so struggling with these conclusions that they're making about something that happened. So we
Mhm.
want to empathize to then get to the what happened. That's really where the energy will be more useful to everybody.
And where do you go from the what happened? Like, it's okay, so you don't love me. Like, you won't let them watch a TV show or something like that.
Mhm.
And, you don't love me. And then where do you go from there?
Yeah, I mean, if it's something, again, sometimes it's we see what happened in the moment that yielded that, that reaction, sort of easier than to say, you are, I can see you're just really upset. You really wanted to watch that show, didn't you? I get what that feels like. I remember that, like, but I want, you say, I know you're really upset about that. And you might even, a big one when it's around rules is rather than saying, we can't watch, I told you. And I have no blame for any parent about this stuff. We all do all of these things, right? It's just not as helpful to say, like, I told you we are shutting off the TV after that show. You might say, do you remember what I said about that show? What's going to happen with the TV? And let the child answer. Because then you can say, they're like, that the TV had to go off. You say, exactly. You're right. Suddenly you have something that you can say that your child is right about instead of correcting them, which is also really helpful in them just being able to exhale, and then again, sometimes when you're just in that space of having that kind of slow, gentle conversation, the child has what they need and they can reset. Sometimes you have to do more than that, but a lot of times just that you're not, that you're willing to take the minute or two to see them and believe that it's hard for them, then, they might say like, okay, or something like that, which is great because feelings don't last forever. And that's part of what kids can experience with our guidance through this is that they can be really upset. They get some comfort or just, pause in it rather than escalating in it. And that feeling can pass. Some kids, it takes more conversation. They might kind of dig in a little bit more, have a harder time transitioning. And you could talk about that too. It sounds like it was a surprise. What do we do about, what can we do about that next time or something like that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
In terms of the when you talk about the mini brain versus the smart brain, would you talk to kids about that when they're not experiencing the negative thinking? And how would you do that? And then how would you use it in the moment?
Yeah. I mean, it is helpful to, again, think about when is your child in that teaching moment? When are they in that frame of mind or, physical uh, space to be able to take in information. Sometimes it's just at the dinner table when nothing's happened, or something, some time like that where it's just sort of downtime and you might say you might go back to something even about yourself. I call this long distance learning. It's
I love that.
helpful when It's not like, well, when that happened to you yesterday, and it's like, I don't want to think about that, or I still feel kind of bad about that. You know, you might teach about something or share about something that happened to you. I forgot something at work, and it's kind of like my mini brain. Like, that's how fast you can introduce this. So for people who are just listening, I'm using my hand as a talking puppet. That's it. So I have my left hand is saying, like, you forget everything. You do such a bad job. And then you bring up your right hand. You might even say to your child, what is my smart brain? What can it say to help? And they might say, don't get mad, mom. You're a great mom. Or like, you don't usually forget, or whatever it is. A minute later, you have a system now for communicating about things. It's that easy. Kids will just go with you about that. It doesn't have to be more involved than that. And then,
Beautiful.
you could refer back to that in another moment where a child's really, upset about something, and say, it just sounds like your meanie brain is saying such mean things right now. And again, yeah, in the book, I talk about this as getting the nodding head, that's really what empathy is about. Your child is experiencing something, you're naming it for them, and instead of escalating, getting mad, they're nodding their head like, "Yes, you see me." So, then you could say, what do you wanna say to your meanie brain, or what does your smart brain know about this? Because it is kind of like, smart brain helpmate. I and with young kids, it's who are kind of living in a state of play, or, just much closer to that. It can be easier for parents to kind of, do a role play with this, to say, like, I'm gonna go get Smart Brain. We need Smart Brain right now. What would Smart Brain say? And again, you're just this work that you're doing on the outside is really changing the landscape on the inside. That instead of your a child just listening to those negative thoughts, I call it thinking in twos. Always think in twos. What's sort of the negative thought that comes first? What's the more accurate thought that comes second? That one we have to work on. The other one, just is very speedy. But like the kids who might shout out an answer in class, they get there first, but it doesn't mean they have the right answer. It just means they're fast. And it's really like that with this kind of thinking.
One thing that you talk about in your book when you have a section on feelings, and I think this is just what you're talking about now, you said, we mistake feeling bad as a validation of a thought rather than a reaction to something unpleasant, and that we need to remove the fear of feelings. Can you give some tips on how parents can do that? Because I think that's really like that's kind of the root of the negative thinking, right? Is that I feel bad because
Mhm.
lost the soccer game, and that doesn't feel good. Like nobody, most people don't like losing, but then that becomes the that it's globally true that I'm terrible at soccer and I should quit the team.
Right, exactly. So, really helping kids, I used the word granular before, getting specific is another way. So, after just naming the feeling that they're having, that you want to feelings come and go. That is how we are built, thankfully, right? We wouldn't be here if we never reset out of fear long ago, that would not have been adaptive. So we do have that. So, but how do you help your child to ride that wave, and, kind of not get in the way of it and have another wave and another wave, is through the empathy, but also, just asking some questions about what's hardest about this, or what feels the worst, or where sometimes even, where do you feel that? I feel so sad. Where is it in your body? What's your, do you want to kind of give some help to that part of your body? For some people, it's more physical like that. But the working through of feelings is really getting to the heart of it, then you understand more and other parts come online because the feeling is more from the limbic system, not rational, logical, all of that. So without rushing your child to the logic, you're willing to go along for the ride. Actually not rushing them will help them kind of get to that more, analytical place sooner, that you say, what is that? If that feeling could talk, what is it? What is it saying? What does that feeling feel like to you? Just doing that at the right moment after, they've kind of been able to see that they're safe with you and feeling what they're feeling, then, they're up here, they're up in their thinking brain, and then, the recovery is going to be much smoother
So
because
you're
they're
saying
able
you're
to.
saying that asking them questions about their feelings can help the thinking brain come back sooner?
Yes, when you've given that moment to just being where they are. I mean, this is
So
what
not too soon,
yeah,
right?
this is
Let
what
them have that, welcome
attunement
the feelings and
yeah,
yeah.
what attunement is really about. That I watched this video that another psychologist shared last year, and it was this maybe 7-year-old child who was just spiraling with anger about the TV being turned off, by the way. But he had other things going on in his life. And when the mom shifted from talking about the TV to saying something like, you're so upset, it's hard to, it was a divorced family, it's hard to be here right now. There was a break in the escalation with a 7-year-old. That that empathy, just coming to that place, being seen, that allowed them to step out of the escalation, and then, things shift, and then you could have a different kind of conversation. So, attunement is really key, that we try to bring our calm. I say this process is a table for two. We if we're upset and or angry or scared of our kids' feelings, we're going to bring that. That will, have an effect. But the more that we can kind of down regulate ourselves and say, this is just now. This is just what they're feeling now. They're going to, I can keep helping them to learn how to, manage their emotions and things like that. When you're doing that for yourself, you can meet them where they are. You're more attuned to what they need and what's going on for them, because your emotions are more kind of manageable for you. And just to be very clear, like, that is a lifelong process of working on
Yeah.
that, right? You
Yeah.
know? You experts are not exempt, that's just human
100%.
nature, that we're yeah, but also that, to understand that we do have that flexibility, that we can modulate our emotions. We do that, we're gonna be much more honest and better teachers for our kids doing that.
That's why our first pillar of peaceful parenting is parental self-regulation.
Mm.
Working on that is the place that we always start.
Yeah.
And I'll share this with you. I heard someone say recently that the two most contagious emotions are calm and panic.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
really working on trying to bring your own calm can, help your child anchor just like what you were talking about. Last content question. One thing I love about your book is that you have so many practical tools like games and things that you can play with your child to help them overcome the negative thinking. And one of my favorite ones that I really liked, and it's so simple, and maybe you could just leave us with that, leave a taste of the different kinds of games and tips you've got in your book, is the pencil or pen game. Can you
I
talk
was
about
I was
that?
thinking, which one are you gonna say? The fortunately, unfortunately game? Which
I
is
almost said unfortunately.
yeah, which I
The 4
love
I
is
had
just
written down
yeah.
were that I was gonna choose from were brain train, fortunately, unfortunately, pencil or pen, and think, branch, leaf. Those were
Yes.
my favorite ones.
Yeah, thank
But
you.
you can actually choose one of those,
Yeah,
whichever one you wanna
I
talk
mean, I
about.
think, all of those games, which you can do outside of the moment, and that's helpful to do it that way, are about increasing flexibility, just response flexibility. And the pencil or pen, it's like, are you I didn't even remember, honestly, exactly the example. Maybe you can read
I think
you
you
may
wrote
be
the book
more
a long time
familiar.
ago, but
But, it's like, this is how you're feeling now. Is that how you're gonna be feeling later? Or is that a fact, that would be written in pen, or more of a feeling that'd be written in pencil that, is changeable?
right, permanent, like permanent or impermanent.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and helping sometimes what feels like pen can actually just be pencil, right?
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think those you talk I don't remember if you call them red flag words, but the always, never,
Mhm.
um, it's,
Everybody,
everyone, no
nobody.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those often are, kids think those are pen, but they're actually pencil.
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
just, working with a family yesterday, and one of the one of my favorite strategies, I don't know if I can find the picture real quick, but is the sum shaker. And when I have taught this to kids, I just love how they will sort of catch their parents so for the folks who are watching the video here, this is a sum shaker. So basically, when you're hearing, so it's like a salt shaker, but with the word some, that when you're hearing the all or not, like everybody, nobody, that you want to look for the sum of it. It's like, I had a terrible time. Nothing, nothing was good. Nothing was fun. Nobody was nice to me. What let's bring the sum shaker where was something okay, was something different than that idea of just the antidote to all or none,
Like
looking for the
like some
exception.
people versus
Some
everyone,
people.
or
Yeah,
sometimes versus all the time, like that
exactly.
kinda adding that some into those. Yeah,
And so,
yeah.
when you teach kids this and then parents come home and say like, you never put your book bag away. It's like, let's get the sum shaker, mom. Never? Or, sometimes do I? So, and I think that's the best. One of the, yeah, one of the things that I just really appreciated about the opportunity to write this this book is just that these, like we were saying at the beginning, this is human nature in a way. Even the best temperament person can kind of fall into these patterns, and it's helpful to just weave these ideas into everyday life because it is something that we all encounter, and importantly, this is how to prevent these patterns from becoming patterns. These responses from becoming patterns that then can lead to depression, where it's really you're convinced of the negative outcomes or negative explanations about things. So this is a helpful way, I think, for really, I wouldn't wait for your child to be showing signs of depression. These are just tools that you can use, regardless, to help kids to be more flexible and resilient and happier. Yeah.
I love it, and I love that reminder that things change, that we that just because our child's exhibiting this negative thinking now doesn't mean that they're always gonna they're always, right? That they're always gonna be negative. Thank you so much. I'll ask you my last question that I ask all my guests, which is, if you could go back in time to your younger parent self, what advice would you give yourself? And it can be having to do with anything. Doesn't have to be about negative thinking.
Do I have to tell my children who are in their 20s and 30s what my answer is?
No, they'll never hear this.
No, they
Unless you want them to.
yeah, they're great, and they will tell me, "Why are you using the emergency voice when we're talking about thank you notes?" Like, "That mom, that is not an emergency to write your thank you notes." I think, just gosh, grace and patience with myself. I think that's what I would want to understand, and it's sort of the wisdom of, as get older as a person, as a parent, that sort of there is time for things to develop and emerge, and not to kind of feel that pressure to have every moment kind of work out the way it needs to. It's not going to. and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
I
I
love
think
that.
probably patience, but I feel like yeah, that has been sort of the what I have learned much more over, over the years.
Yeah, not feeling like it has to be right now sort of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Nice.
Because if we can bring that to our parenting, gosh, how helpful for kids to just have that space instead of them kind of picking up on our inner pressure and them feeling pressure and everything. So, yeah, for sure.
That's such a theme in my coaching. I'm always telling parents, it's not the playoffs. It's a
Yes.
long game.
Yes. Oh, that's great.
Mhm. So, where can folks go to find out more about you and what you do? And we'll put links in the show notes to your books as well as whatever you're
Sure.
about to tell me.
Well, I have been blogging for decades now, and there's just a treasure trove, I will say, of blog posts and ideas on my website, which is tamarchansky.com. So there's a great search feature there. And if you put in social anxiety, bedtime fear, and negative thinking, sports, there are a lot of articles about sports there. You just put in the topic, chances are you will find a post about it. And if not, contact me on the on the website and maybe I will write a post about it. So tamarchansky.com. And
Perfect.
I do post things on Instagram, which is Tamar Chansky PhD.
Okay, great. Well, we'll link to those. And this has been such a helpful conversation. And I really appreciate your time and wisdom.
Oh, it's just been lovely talking to you. I learned so much from you. So
Oh,
thank
that's
you.
nice.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.